Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Wei Luo will defend the academic thesis Personal Environmental Control Systems, Comfort, Health and Productivity in Offices. May I invite you to present a summary of your studies and the conclusions of your thesis?
Thank you. Dear pro-actor, dear supervisors, members of the thesis committee, family, friends, and colleagues, thank you for coming today. In the past few years, I've been investigating an urgent question concerning energy crisis, sustainability, and climate change. This question is about indoor temperature control. After the Industrial Revolution, we have the ability to regulate indoor temperature by using air conditioning, ventilation, and heaters. These systems burn energy and cool or heat our houses. The aim of indoor temperature control is to provide thermal comfort. In order to do that in practice, these systems normally regulate the indoor temperature at around 22 degrees, with limited daily and seasonal variations. It is believed that such stable temperature can minimize thermoregulation effort and therefore leads to thermal comfort. However, it also resulted in a very high energy consumption. About 20% of the global energy consumption and the green gas emissions are related to indoor temperature controls. Facing this issue, we should start rethink about it. Before the air conditioning era, humans could inhabit various climate zones with temperature variations. So why don't we relax indoor temperature control and reintroduce some temperature variations indoors? There are two reasons for doing that. The first reason is energy savings. Relaxing indoor temperature control means that in summer, the indoor temperature can be a little bit higher, and in winter, the indoor temperature can be a little bit lower. Therefore, we need less energy to heat or cool our houses. Secondly, temperature variations may even benefit our health. Exposure to temperature variations, for example, exposure to cold and heat, can stimulate human thermoregulations and elicit physiological responses, including blood distributions actively involving our cardiovascular systems. Repeatedly stimulating human thermoregulation can make it more efficient and increase our heat or cold resilience, that is our ability to cope with stressful temperature events such as heat waves. More importantly, study has been showing that 10 days repeatedly exposure to mild cold and mild heat can increase our insulin sensitivities and improve our metabolic health. Also, temperature variation has some benefit. It still faces some challenges. The first challenge is individual differences. Everyone perceives the temperature differently. Let me give you an example. Last winter, we all experienced 19 degrees office temperatures. Watch how my colleagues respond to it. On the left hand, this colleague is wearing a very thick coat, but on the right hand, the colleague is wearing a t-shirt. We can see that is a very large individual differences. Therefore, temperature variations may compromise thermal comfort on an individual level. Secondly, people may worry that the thermal discomfort will decrease our productivities, which is very important for business operations. Therefore, in order to address these challenges, my PhD research aims to answer essential questions: how to improve thermal comfort and the productivity on an individual level while retaining the healthy thermal stimulations to the body, using temperature variation as an energy-saving strategies. I tested 3 setups in winter office scenarios. In the first setup, I test the personal comfort systems. The personal comfort systems can locally heat or cool a specific part of the body. For example, traditional personal comfort system consisting of a heating or cooling chairs, which can heat or cool the torsos and the bottoms. The users can control the system by themselves without significantly affecting neighbors. Therefore, such personal comfort system can provide individual thermal comfort. However, this system still cools or heats a very large area of the human body, so the healthy thermal stimulations to the body may be reduced substantially. In order to keep the healthy thermal stimulation and also improve the thermal comfort, I designed a novel personal comfort system, which precisely targeting the local discomfort. In cold conditions, our hands and feet are the coldest part, so we can just heat up our hands and feet. In warm conditions, our head are the warmest part, so we just can cool our heads. Using such system, we can successfully address the local discomfort. Therefore, we expected that the whole body thermal comfort will be improved. At the same time, such system only cools or heat a very small area of the human body, leaving the rest of the body, a large area of the human body, exposed to temperature variations. So we expect that the healthy thermal stimulations to the body can be retained. In order to test this concept, we designed a personal comfort system consisting of 2 personal fans for cooling our heads, a heating desk for warming up our hands, and a heating mat for warming up our feet. This system was tested in a drifting temperature scenarios, starting from 17 degrees and gradually increased to 25 degrees, and stable at 25 degrees afterwards. We tested 2 scenarios, one scenario with such personal comfort system, another scenario without these systems. This experiment was conducted in respiration chamber at Maastricht University, where the environmental parameters can be well controlled. On the right graph, you can see here is a participant performing the experiment. The result shows that in 17 to 23 degrees, which means in cold to neutral conditions, the personal comfort system substantially improved our thermal comfort. However, it does not affect cognitive performance. This indicates that comfort also does not necessarily influence our performance. Finally, we observe that the physiological responses between the 2 scenarios are similar, which implies that the healthy thermal stimulation to the human body remains. The result generally validated our hypothesis that the designed personal comfort system can improve thermal comfort while retaining healthy thermal stimulations to the body. In the second setup, I tested light colors. Why light colors can affect temperature perception can often explained by the hue-heat hypothesis. It indicates that when you see yellowish color like this, you will feel a little bit warm. When you see a bluish color like this, you will feel a little bit cold. Therefore, we can manipulate the light colors to influence people's thermal comfort. In order to test the effect of light color, we tested 2 scenarios, one with yellowish light on the left hand, and one with a bluish light on the right hand. Previous study mostly test the light color with a very short exposure durations, for example, 10 minutes. In this study, we tested the light color with a very long exposure durations of 140 minutes in a 17 degrees temperatures. We expect that the yellowish light can actually improve our thermal comfort in cold conditions. However, the result is quite surprising. We observe that the bluish light actually improved thermal comfort compared to yellowish light. This can be explained by the non-visual effect of light. The non-visual effect of light is the effect beyond vision. With prolonged exposure durations, the non-visual effect of light may exert more influence on thermal comfort, leading to a higher thermal comfort in blue light scenarios. In addition to that, we also see the cognitive performance was enhanced in blue light scenarios. In the third setup, I tested personal lighting systems. Our previous study shows that the visual comfort was positively associated with thermal comfort. With the increase of visual comfort, the thermal comfort also increased. So we were wondering if we can increase the visual comfort to improve our thermal comfort. Because everyone perceives the light also quite differently, so we used a personal lighting system to provide individual visual comfort. We want to see how such lighting system, personal lighting system, can affect our thermal comfort and productivities. The experiment first exposed the participant to two initial light, one with yellowish light, another one with bluish light, for 70 minutes. Afterwards, we either give them personal control over the light color or without personal control for another 70 minutes. The result shows that the personal lighting system, as we expected, substantially improved our visual comfort. However, we did not observe any influence on thermal comfort. This indicates that visual comfort does not causally affecting our thermal comfort. In addition to that, the cognitive performance between the two scenarios are also similar. Again, we observe that the comfort does not necessarily affect our performance. In summary, for my PhD research, I aim to address two challenges. One is thermal comfort, another one is productivities. We repeatedly observe that comfort and productivity do not go hand in hand. Therefore, the cold temperature does not necessarily will affect our productivities. In addition to that, the personal comfort system can provide individual thermal comfort. On top of that, the blue light can further improve our thermal comfort and productivities. However, the personal lighting system may not affect thermal comfort. We now can improve thermal comfort and productivities while retaining healthy thermal stimulations and saving energies. Thank you for your attention. Now I give my words back to the pro actor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luo, for this very clear presentation. It's now time to start with the opposition. And the opposition will be opened by Professor Hesselink. He was chair of the assessment committee, and he's professor of physical activity and metabolic health at Maastricht University.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I'd like to congratulate you with your finishing of your thesis and wrapping up a set of nice studies that you have done throughout a very complicated period. I think when you arrived here, we had just Corona times, and I'm sure it must not have been fun to do the studies in this period and just arriving in a new country and being isolated. So I think there's a few words on that, and I think it's really a big achievement that you managed to do this. In these congratulations, I'd also like to congratulate the promotion team. And after having done that, I think we need to move to some questions. I was impressed by the work that you did and the propositions that came from it. And I'd like to ask one of the paranymphs to read proposition 1. Almost a doctor, can you do that?
Human physiological thermoregulation can be stimulated without compromising thermal comfort by using a personal comfort system that warms hands and feet in a cool office environment.
Thank you. So basically I need to keep my head cool and my hand and feet warm. Why is the latter of importance? Why do I need to keep my hand and feet warm?
Because, thank you very much, highly esteemed opponent. Thank you for your kind words. My opinion is that because the whole body thermal comfort is determined according to the literature, most likely is to be determined by the local thermal discomfort. In a cold conditions, the hand and the feet are the most uncomfortable part. So we need to improve or address the local discomfort. Therefore, we can improve the whole body thermal comfort.
Thank you. So it's basically more like a comfort issue than it is something health related whatsoever.
In addition to that, because the human thermoregulations is driven in a moderate temperature range, is driven by the skin temperature mostly, because the core temperature stay pretty much stable in a very small range. Therefore, the skin temperature is the main driver for the thermoregulations. If we heat up the hand and the feet, it's only a very, very small area of the body being heated. So the rest of the body are exposed to cold temperatures. Therefore, the skin temperature of the rest of the body will be pretty much similar and excite our thermoregulations. And with prolonged stimulating human thermoregulations, we expect that it will have some healthy effect based on literatures.
Okay, thank you. So in chapter 3, you use this experimental setting where you have this personal controlled setting with the hand and feet being warmed, the chair being warmed, there's a few fans that cool your head, and on the details I think other people might ask questions. I'd like to discuss the outcome of this study to some extent. You use a range of ambient or air temperatures from 17 to 26 degrees. And if we then go to figure 6 on page 72, you got your figures there?
Yes.
Yeah. Then we basically see that at the 17 degrees air temperature, you find a difference in basal metabolic rate that equals approximately 6%. And
yes.
The difference is there in the personalized control system at 70 degrees. Is that correct interpretation of the graph?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. How would you position this difference in I mean, it's a 6% difference. Is that, from a health perspective, is that a relevant difference? I mean, it's statistically significant, but is it physiologically relevant, this 6%? Could you speculate on that?
Yes. Thank you for your questions. I think 6% of metabolism maybe not that much, because I think the major, if we eat food, the energy we intake normally will much higher than 6% of the metabolism, basal metabolism. And also, we observe a higher metabolism in personal control system is because of a higher physical activity in personal control system. But actually, we don't know why people will act more actively in personal control system with the personal control scenario. Maybe because they control the system, so they need to move a little bit. But we expect that such a difference is not that significant in daily practice. Yeah.
Yeah. So you already touched upon the physical activity, and I was also struck by the fact that also these numbers were near or completely significantly higher in the PCS condition. So to get some grip on whether or not it is the physical activity that contributes to these changes in metabolism, did you happen to correlate the deltas between basal metabolic rate change and physical activity markers, either from the PI or from the other physical activity marker that you use? Did you compute correlations?
Yes, I actually tried that when I processed the data. The physical activity is highly correlated with metabolism, which is quite common, like in the literature.
Yeah.
So we did that. Yes, the physical activity is correlated with metabolism.
So then do we think that these effects that you observe, are these temperature-induced effects? Are they directly related to temperature, or is it basically physical activity that you see that increases basal metabolic rate?
Actually, according to the literature, if you expose the people to 17 degrees with a light clothing, it will increase a little bit about your metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
But in this study, we also see increase in physical activities. So I would say it's both. It's not just like only physical activity or only the temperatures. On the other hand, because for the 17 degrees, we only expose people to 7 degrees, I think, for half hour, an hour. Maybe it's not long enough to elicit the increase in metabolic rate. So I cannot tell you definitively, but I would say this increase in metabolism is mainly due to the increase of physical activity instead of the mild cold temperatures.
Okay, thank you. Then I'd like to move a bit forward to the things that you did on light in chapter 5. And I was actually interested into what you have observed in a more like blue light condition. I think you sort of show that this blue light can improve thermal comfort without the potentially negative effects on cognitive function and other things. So from this study, I would conclude the blue light exposure is beneficial. Is that something you would support, that conclusion?
Yes, actually in the article, we actually discussed a little bit about why we observe the blue light can improve thermal comfort compared to yellowish light. Because for the thermal comfort, there are two pathways for the light to affect it, including both visual pathway and non-visual pathway. For visual pathway, it's often explained by the Hue-heat hypothesis, where you see different colors, you will feel warmer or colder. For the non-visual pathways, may be mainly driven by some physiological changes. For the visual pathway, or for the Hue-heat hypothesis, we kind of hypothesis, or we argue that it might be very highly individual. So maybe for the visual pathway, because of we only include like 16 participants, maybe because just these 16 participants didn't respond to the light colors. But maybe for other populations, they might respond to the light colors. But for the non-visual we expect that everybody will respond to it with the same extent. So interesting is that these two pathways is not goes in the same directions. Yeah. They are opposite directions. Therefore, it will depend on the population we are measured, how long it's exposed, what the illuminance is. The result might change a little bit. So I would not definitively recommend people to use blue light in cold conditions, in office scenarios, to improve the thermal comfort. But from my study, we saw that blue light actually improved it. Yeah. So we need a little bit more research to give a more comprehensive recommendation about this.
Thank you. There's always need for more research. That's what we as scientists say. Do I have time for one more short question? Yeah. So you might have seen that in the building that you have been working, we're currently renovating and refurbishing the building. Yeah. At the ground floor, I happen to have a new office, and it has a very bright, very blue light. I did not measure it, but if I entered the room, I was hoping I was wearing shades. How would you recommend to sort of create my office space, given that I have this blue light, given that I'd like to stay awake and I'd like to stay healthy? Can you give me an advice on what to do with feed, with heating, with how would I create my office space?
Yes, I thank you for your question. It's a very interesting question. Because for academia, we all know that if you implement one manipulations, it will affect so many different aspects. So it really depends what kind of things you want. For example, if you want to make people feel visually comfortable in the office, I heard a lot of people said, actually the yellowish light makes me relax, so I would like a yellowish light. But from the health aspect, the literature shows that we need like enough illuminance during the light in order to promote our circadian rhythms. And the blue light, the bluish part of the light actually can benefit our circadian rhythm. So for the health aspect, I would recommend to use a more bluish light in the office scenarios. Yeah.
Here, very brief. Yeah? Very brief. My children, I just tell to them, get away from the mobile phones, get away from your tablet in the evenings, because it gives you insulin resistance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also because the light effect of human physiology really depends on the time of the day. During the day, you want more light. During the night, keep it dark.
Thank you. I give the word back.
Thank you very much. The opposition will be continued by Professor Bluijsen, also a member of the assessment committee. She's professor of indoor environment at the University of Technology in Delft, and she's present online.
Yes, thank you. Now, dear Wei, let me also first start complimenting you for this great work of research. I've read your thesis really with pleasure. And the outcome that you showed, that really shows that we have some possibilities for the future. Now, I also have some questions related to Proposition 1. I'm not going to ask your paronyms to read it again, but I would like to immediately ask about specific wording you used in this Proposition 1. And you state that human physiological thermoregulation can be stimulated without compromising thermal comfort by using these PECs. Now, as I understood the work you did, and also in your short presentation just now, you don't really stimulate human physiological thermoregulation with these PECs, but you try to not disturb this thermal physiological regulation. Am I misunderstanding this? Can you explain?
Can you repeat the question again? Because you are referring that I use the word stimulate instead of...
Yes, you said human physiological thermoregulation can be stimulated when you use these PECs and these personal comfort systems. Now, as I understood from your research, you're not using these PECs to stimulate human physiological thermoregulation, but you try to prevent that it's disturbed, that it's stopped. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for your questions, highly esteemed opponent. The word I use for stimulate, it really depends which angle you are looking at it. For the healthy aspect, because if we permanently resident in a neutral temperature, then the human thermoregulation is kind of has minimum effort. If you're exposed to temperature variation, then in order to promote health, then we call it stimulate the thermoregulations. So that's why we use the word stimulate.
Ah, okay. So I misunderstood that part then. Now, going into that study you did, it's mainly reported in chapter 3, I believe. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, in that chapter, you described this study with the heated mat to warm the part on which the feet are resting while wearing shoes and socks, and so separating the skin from the heated mat, right? And you use a partly heated desk to warm the hands while wearing long sleeves. So it's not the arms that are immediately heated. But I'm still a little bit puzzled. How, in fact, is this heat transfer? Could you explain that maybe by using figure 1 at page 60? How is the heat transferred to the feet? And how is it transferred to the hands? What type of process is it?
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. You are correct. When people use the heat index, it's not only heat up the hands, it also heat up your underarms as well. So for this heating desk, the main mechanism transfer heat from the desk to hands is through conductions. Because people put their hands on the desk, conduction, because they put their hands on the desk. Therefore, the heat will directly goes to the hand by conduction. Also the same for the heating mat, because people put their feet on the heating mat. Of course, there also might be a little bit convection heat transfer, because the systems it's like heating system, therefore a little bit part of the heat will release to the air, and the air may also will transfer some heat to the hand or to the feet. Yeah, but I expect it's like very minimal heat transfer from the heated air to the hand and the feet. The most heat is transferred by conductions.
Yeah, and if I saw the picture you showed in your short presentation 50 minutes ago, I noticed that people were using their mouths. Is that correct?
Yes, people will not always use their mouth. When they do some cognitive tasks, they will use their mouth. Yes.
So, but is it correct to assume that most heat was in fact transferred via the arms and not via the hands?
During the experiment, we actually specifically to ask the participant, if you finish all the tasks, please put your hands on the desk. Just to, for controlling for that. Because if people don't use the system, keep your hands like this, then nothing will happen, right? So because we wanted to show how to the effect of heating hand and heating feet, so we ask them to actually put their hand and the feet on the device. Yeah.
Okay, great. That clears it up. Now at page 206 in paragraph 7.4.1, you state, well, this thesis is mainly looked into the winter situation. And when we want to, in fact, have lower temperatures than that we need. And you use these packs to heat the hands and feet to do that. But you also looked into a potential pack to be used to cool in warm conditions by using these fans for your head. Now you identify that we could perhaps have another study going on where we look more into detail what type of packs could be used to cool the body in a summer situation. Do you have some other packs in mind than these fans that you used?
Thank you for your questions. So for cooling, especially for the personal comfort system, I think in the literature, most people using a ventilation chair, cooling chair, to cool the torsos and the bottoms of the body. But because for my research, I want to keep the healthy thermostimulations, that's why I use it to cool the head. So except for the cooling fans, we can also use some cooling radiation panel, put it above our head. Therefore, this cold radiations can also cool our head. This is one way to do that. Besides that, I don't think we have a very nice way to cool our head, except for the ventilation fan and the cool radiations. Yeah.
So to change the proposition 1 into the last part, into using personal comfort systems that cools hand and feet in a warm office building, that's not possible?
So since that...
So would that be...
Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, thank you for
the
question.
connection is...
Yeah. So you hands and feet in warm conditions, right, to improve thermal comfort while retaining the healthy thermal stimulations. So because for the thermal comfort, the major drive for thermal discomfort is local discomfort, while in the warm conditions, your head is the warmest part. So we want to solve the head warm discomfort. Therefore, the most effective way, I would say, is to cooling the head.
Is that true, in fact? Because in hot environments, when in very hot environments, you start to sweat and your cooling occurs because you're sweating. Evaporative cooling occurs. Now, the most sweat glands, I think, we have in our hands and feet.
Yes.
So would there not be a way to prevent that we start sweating somehow?
Yes. It really depends on the environmental temperature. If you start sweating, I would expect the temperature is quite high already. But in the normal office scenarios, we want to keep it a little bit moderate or mild, which means a little bit higher, but not too high, leads to your sweating. Yes. So in that situation, cooling the head, we think is the most effective way, according to based on the literature we have read, to our best knowledge. But in the very warm condition, you are correct, because the hands and the face has the most sweat gland, and also the hand and the face also have the small, like special vessels, which can be opened directly during the warm, so there are huge blood flow on your palms of the hand. So in this way, in a very warm condition, cooling your hands and the feet maybe could be more effective than head. Yes. And on the other way, because we also wanted to improve productivity, according to our result in chapter 4, we see that actually cooling the head maybe could be the most effective way to improve your productivity independent of the thermal comfort. So the head is very important for the productivities. And then we need to keep the head cool. Therefore, considering all of this, I still think in a moderate temperature, office temperature, we should cool the head instead of cool the hands and the feet. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Bluijsen. The opposition will be continued by Professor Eichholz, Professor of Real Estate Finance at Maastricht University.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, I'd like to congratulate you with a fine piece of work, really impressive, very clearly written chapters, and I already see some great publications coming out, so congratulations with that. I also thought it was very inspiring. As you know, on this side of the river, we've also been working on indoor environment and how it affects productivity and health. But we come from, let's say, a real estate finance and investment perspective. You come from another perspective, but it's really cool to see the production you create in this field. So very inspiring. Now, of course, I have some questions because that's what this afternoon is for. And in fact, I've got 3. And they all relate to chapter 6 and also a bit to chapter 5. So chapter 6 is about personal control in these, let's say, visual temperature situations. And when I first looked at the chapter, I thought, okay, well, you give people personal control, but they probably don't use it, because I'm used to research in economics where if we ask people if they want control, people always say, yes, I want control. And then if we look whether they actually do something with it, they don't use it. They always opt for the default. And that's probably because very often to exert your control really implies an effort. You really have to study. For example, if you want to have control about the investments of your pension fund, you really have to study investments. Nobody's interested, so nobody uses the control. In your case, the control was incredibly easy because it was just one button. And so maybe one policy outcome out of that chapter is, if you want to give people control, make it incredibly easy. So that's not a policy outcome I see, but maybe that would be an advice that you could add to your paper. But then I was intrigued that, in fact, in your situation, the majority of the people did use the control, which is, like I said, completely different than my experience. And then I was thinking, okay, is there actually a difference between the people who use the control and the people who don't? Because there are still some people, it's a minority, who don't do anything with it. They have the option, they don't use the option. Is there a difference in the outcomes of this group versus the other group? Can you say something about that?
Thank you for your words, highly esteemed opponent. Yeah, thank you for your question. It's very intriguing me. To be honest, when I start to conducting the experiment, I also think about it. The things that even people don't control the system, but they're still having the control, according to the literature, perceived control, which means you have a feeling that you can control the thing, can also improve our comfort. According to some theories, such kind of perceived control may even improve our productivities. So, no matter you control or not control, this part still exists.
Yeah.
And the second part is that for the people who controlled that, they definitely can improve their comfort for sure. Because of the sample size issues, I didn't separate people with control and no control and compare these two. But I would expect that for the people who really control the system will have higher improvement in comfort, not necessarily in productivity, because from my result we see the comfort and the productivity does not go hand in hand. Yeah. But for the people who does not really exercise the control but still have it, they will have like a little bit like smaller improvement in comfort. Yeah. That's my speculations. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds plausible. The second question relates to it relates to the abstract of that chapter. It says, well, there are some studies that say that thermal and visual comfort are correlated, but it's not quite clear why. That's your first statement. But then that's very intriguing. Then, of course, I want to know why, especially because I'm not in this field, so I can ask all these stupid questions. So, my question then to you is, why don't we speculate a bit, or why don't you speculate a bit, and give me your idea of why this would be the case?
Yes, thank you for your questions. So according to the literature, visual comfort does positively associate with thermal comfort. But this is association in nature. Association does not imply causalities. So they can be both ways. Either visual comfort can affect thermal comfort, or thermal comfort affect visual comfort, or both. So in this study, we test how visual comfort can affect thermal comfort. The thing we see that the visual comfort improved a lot, but thermal comfort stayed similar. So we say that the visual comfort does not affect thermal comfort. So it perhaps could be another way around. Thermal comfort will affect visual comfort. This is one explanation for that. Mm-hmm. The second explanation for that is that because in our study, we tested a normal office lightings, which means the lighting will not make people feel very, very, very discomfort. So the people still feel it's like on the border of discomfort, but not a very, very discomfort. If the lighting can make people feel very, very, very discomfort, give them personal control, they will obtain some pleasure because they relieve such discomfort. This pleasure maybe can also transferred to thermal comfort, but only when the initial lighting system is very, very discomfort. So this is the second explanation. But for our study, we want to investigate a normal office scenarios. So for the normal office scenarios, we would say visual comfort does not affect thermal comfort. It's perhaps another way around. Thermal comfort will affect visual comfort. Thank you.
Thank you. My third question is a bit related to the one of Professor Hesseling, the chair of your committee, who also used his own experience, recent experience, and made you speculate on that. Yesterday, I was in a meeting that took far too long, 4.5 hours or something. Usually, after about 2 hours, my performance goes down tremendously. My eyes my eyes close, and I fall asleep. But this time, I was actually pretty active all through the meeting. And in the beginning of that meeting, I looked up at the ceiling, and there was this Signify Nature Connect. It didn't say Signify, but I happened to recognize. Probably you know the system. So there was this ceiling, this sort of ceiling of light, with a sort of artificial blue sky. And at first, I looked at it, and I was really believing it was a blue sky. Although I knew that I was on a ground floor level on a building with 6 floors, so it was very unlikely that it was actually blue sky. Of course, it wasn't. But let's say the suggestion was so incredibly strong, I kept looking at it and thought it was a blue sky. It even had a sort of shadow in it. It was quite amazing. And I was really staying awake all afternoon, and it was completely boring, the whole meeting. It was just the meeting that you terribly fall asleep. So normally. So why do you think this works the way it does? Why did it keep me awake?
First Firstly, I would say, thank you for the question first. Firstly, I would say because you see a blue sky, so perhaps indicate the light is blue. In the literature, the blue light can elicit alertness, which means under blue light, we'll feel a little bit more alert. The second is that because the light directions could also affect our physiological response and also alertness. So the ceiling light is come from our head. So the direction of the light maybe can also elicit a higher alertness as compared to the light in front of you. So that could be the second pathway in a way. The third, because you see the blue light, blue skies, which kind of mimic our natures. So there are some literature shows that if you're exposed to nature, it can make you feel more relaxed and maybe more alert. So that could be the third reason for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Eichholz. Then the opposition will be continued by Professor Schweiger, also a member of the assessment committee. He's professor of healthy living spaces at RWTH Aachen.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, first of all, also from my side, congratulations for the thesis and the work you have done. It was a pleasure reading through, even in preparations of other things, not having much time, but I really enjoyed reading. I think you did very interesting studies, and I also noted down several references I need to check again for studies we do. So it was really nice, and I also learned a few things in addition to the things we do. I found two, not sure if I should call them contradictions or challenges, which I would like to address first. The first is, I would say, more on the conceptual side. You're proposing these PACs, personal comfort systems for individual persons to get comfortable. At the same time, your first propositions, which we discussed already earlier in the question, says you want to promote thermal stimuli, healthy thermal stimuli. So isn't that a contradiction that you want to give people all the means to get neutral, to have no stimulation at all, while at the same time you say, okay, we need to get outside of the comfort range and have some stimulation for the people?
And highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your questions. It's very interesting. This is actually the central question we're trying to solve in chapter 3 and also in this thesis. We want to improve the thermal comfort or keep the thermal comfort while also stimulating thermal regulation systems. The tricks we do is that we only hit a very small part of the body, and then we can solve the thermal local discomfort. Therefore, it will improve our thermal comfort. And then also rest of the body are exposed to cold or to heat. Therefore, that will stimulate our thermal regulations. So by combining these two together, we expect that the systems can improve thermal comfort while retaining healthy thermal stimulations. And also the common belief or the classic textbook interpretation of thermal comfort only occurs when the thermal regulation system has minimum effort, is valid under a stable and uniform temperature conditions. However, for the personal comfort system, we actually create a non-uniform temperature conditions. So in such way, this statement may not be valid under such special conditions.
Okay, so you mean that at the end we should not provide all the means to get it comfortable, only
Yes.
for these specific
Yes.
elements. So you will not continue to develop the system to also...
I always think things need to have some limit, have some restrictions. If you always keep people comfortable, people will get picky and picky. At the end, they will not enjoy such neutral temperature. But if we give them a dynamic temperature or give them dynamic perceptions of the temperature, they will feel a little bit cold or a little bit warm and then neutral. They perhaps will more appreciate such temperatures. And also, if you first exposed to like a discomfortable environment and then you get comfortable by changing the environment, it will also elicit anesthesia. That's the kind of pleasure the environment gives to you that may even beneficial than stable neutral environment. So my understanding is that we really need to give people a dynamic temperature not a stable, but a dynamic temperature. Not necessarily neutral, both cold and heat. Therefore, it can, like in the long term, benefit our comfort and also health in a way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The second point is more on the methodological side, as we've also done studies where we give the participants control over the conditions.
Yeah.
At the same time, I mean, some very important aspect of laboratory and experimental studies is that you have comparable conditions. But in the moment you give your participants control over the conditions, you lose the comparability between the actual thermal or visual conditions between participants. How did you react to this challenge, and what is your solution for that?
You mean in field study?
No, in the experimental study. In your laboratories,
Yeah.
usually you would like to have comparable or the same conditions for all the participants.
Yes.
But now you give the participants control over the conditions. So
Yeah.
from that moment, the conditions are not the same anymore.
Yeah.
And what is the implications of that?
The things we normally do is that we will do two scenarios, one with personal control, one without personal control. And then we test these two scenarios for all the participants. So it's within subject design. The trick we do is that we need to randomize the two conditions, the order of the two conditions. Therefore, we can balance all the confounders. Therefore, from the result, we can estimate the unbiased effect of personal control on the outcomes.
But
So we
still, in these two conditions, with control, without control, you have different physical environmental conditions, right?
But in the lab study, we actually control the environmental conditions pretty much the same. Yes.
So the control is only fake for the participants?
No, because we keep in the environmental condition because the personal comfort system is like locally heat up the hand and the feet. It will not affect the environmental condition that much. We actually observe a very, very small difference. If you're using the heating system, the air temperature around you will be 0.2 degrees higher, 0.115 or 0.2, I forgot, but pretty much, but it's very, very small because the heat will also release to the air. But because of this difference is very, very small, so we think it is acceptable. So we can see that the effect in this study are mainly caused by the personal comfort system instead of by changing of the environmental conditions.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
But, sorry, can I add more? In addition to that, because the raised air temperature around the participant is also caused by the personal comfort system. So in a way, it's also the effect of personal comfort systems instead of the air temperature, because the personal comfort system caused the rise in air temperature and then caused improve in comfort perceptions. So it's also part of the personal comfort system. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If I may ask one more question. Yeah. I will try to make it short. These personal comfort systems, as you also introduced, are for individual persons, which have very different characteristics, age, gender, also cultural background, and so on. And your studies, your experiments, they're mainly on a very specific group with limited variability. Can you speculate a bit what you would expect with different target groups, different populations, and also maybe what could be challenges related to that if you apply these systems outside the laboratory in real practice?
Thank you for your questions. For in this study, we mainly test young adult, which means, but we both include male and female, which means that we didn't test the older generation and also children's. For the older generation, they might have a little bit more like compromised thermoregulatory system or compromised thermoregulations. Therefore, we would expect that when exposed to same cold temperature, the elders will feel like more discomfort than the adult. But the general principle is the same. For example, when you expose the cold, it's always the blood flow in the hand and the feet is always the decrease the first, and then start with the torso, because they have some biological meaning in it. We want to keep the most vital organ safe instead of your hand and the feet. So for the elderly, we also expect that in cold conditions, the hand and the feet will be the coldest part. Therefore, we can heat up the hand and the feet and improve their comfort. Maybe the improvement will not maybe even be greater than the young adult, yeah, from my opinion. Therefore, I think such personal comfort system can be generally applied in all populations to improve their thermal comfort. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Schweiker. Then the opposition will be continued by Dr. Plasky, also a member of the assessment committee. He's Associate Professor of Human Energy Metabolism at Maastricht University.
Thank you. Dear candidate, also from me, many congratulations on this nice book. And I've learned a lot because it's not really my area of expertise, not yet. But so I've learned a lot from you. Also, congratulations to your supervising team. First of all, you discussed with Professor Hesselink that our building is being renovated as we speak. His office is already renovated, so for him it's too late. So I will give you the number of the contractor so he can still renovate my office in the proper way. If you would like to advise him, I would really appreciate that. On the questions, you also discussed with Professor Hesselink energy expenditure in chapter 3. I still have a few follow-up questions on that. And I think you said that the 6% may not be that relevant or not clinically relevant or not be that much. I think it's like 0.32 kilojoules a minute that you measured that it was higher with your personal comfort system. So that would be between 400 and 500 kilojoules a day, which would be over 100 calories a day if that effect would persist throughout the whole day, because BMR is basically throughout the whole day. So is it really not clinically relevant, the 6%, if you would say over 100 calories a day difference that may happen, yes or no, with your personal comfort system?
Esteemed opponent, thank you for your questions. For the energy metabolism, increase energy metabolism in the personal comfort system, we kind of expect that this increase is caused by increase of physical activities. And the increase of physical activity, to be honest, we don't know why exactly. Participants will be more active in personal comfort system. We expect that maybe they control the system, then it costs a little bit energy, but we guess it's maybe not really the case because they only control it with limited times. So overall, it may not cause that much increase in physical activities. Maybe because the participant just feels more excited under such conditions, so they move a little bit more. But for the long exposure durations, we expect because participants already know how to use the systems, so the control behavior maybe will be less, and maybe they will feel less excited, then the physical activity will stay the same as compared to no personal comfort systems. Therefore, we expect for long exposure durations, maybe the personal comfort system cannot really affect our metabolisms. So that's why I would expect such a system will not have that much effect really to increase our energy expenditure in the daily life. Yes, but you're right, actually 6% of the energy expenditure would be, if we can keep such effect for the daily life with like 1 year or 2 years, that could make a difference for people.
So yes. You don't expect it to last?
Yeah, I don't expect it to last for a year or a couple of months. I don't expect that. Yeah.
Okay, then another question is, you have measured body composition.
Yes.
But you show very few results on that.
Yes.
Is it not important? Wouldn't you expect, because you also talk about lots of inter-individual variation in responses. Yeah. Is body composition one of the causes or possible causes? How do you see that?
Yeah, thank you for your questions. We didn't really test how such systems will affect our body compositions. We just measure the body composition as a characteristic of the participant. And because this characteristic, which we put in the regression model, it can reduce the variance of the random error, so it can improve the statistical power of the model. Therefore, I measured the body compositions. And I actually used the body composition in my data. I put it in the regression model and then trying to, as a covariates, trying to improve the model. For some parameters, it starts show significant result. So body composition could be a, for example, thermal comfort. Body composition could be a important factor affecting thermal comfort, and also for metabolism as well. So I do use the body composition as a covariant in my result, but it's not a main result in this thesis, as we did not really treat it as an outcome. On the other hand, because we only test like 1 day or 2 days, we don't expect a big change in body composition. It's not
I wasn't expecting a change. I was more interested in if that could explain the wide variation in responses that you see between subjects.
Sure. Yes.
Because I think you corrected for age and BMI, if I read it correctly, and I didn't see the body composition coming back, hence my question.
It's actually in the heat loss. Sorry, can I finish it? Yeah, we can discuss later.
You can finish a short answer?
Actually, the body composition is included in the heat loss ability and the heat generate ability, because I kind of put body composition with other physical anthropometric characters to put them together to get a comprehensive indication for the body. So it's included, but it's more like a little bit more complex.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Wei Luo, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and of your defense, and I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
Yeah, thank you.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. All your time, 'cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and not. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and not. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Wei Luo. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor van Marke Lichtebelt is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Please, all right.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times? To be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Wei Luo, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate, signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Okay, thank you. One more time. Fantastic. Oh, now you keep it.
Okay, keep it.
Dr. Luo, dear Wei, fantastic. I'm very happy that I can talk to you now during this so important occasion. I do this on behalf of your other supervisors, Professor Yvonne de Kort and Rick Kramer. Very good. You did it. As we all knew you would do it. You worked on a very multidisciplinary research and you did it very well. But let's first some background, because you got an interesting background already during your studies, and that's why we asked you for an interview. Before coming to Maastricht, you did your bachelor in China on building environment and equipment. Your graduation project was already on heating and cooling, certain systems that you tested at the Xi'an School Library. And then you graded with the remark, outstanding design. Then followed your master at the Tianjin University, and then again you worked on the heating and air conditioning systems, and with the dissertation in the end on the acclimation effects of thermal environments. For several of your activities you received significant awards, so we were happy to have an interview with you, and during the interviews we could only talk by Zoom. But the discussion was, immediately it was good, although your English still needed some improvement. If I recall well, we had nice 2 calls by telephone, by the Zoom, and you had to design a small study, which you did, and you wrote a nice 2-pager. So we took some risk to take you all the way from China. English needs some improvement, but the reason why we choose you is that you had really an open and inquisitive attitude. And we got the impression that you were really a go-getter. And that's what you now prove. And then you came, and the first time I met you was in Café Tembi, of all places. So that's a local pub that was here. You were very friendly, and I saw you looking at us and to some extent studying how are these people behaving and what is their eating behavior and things like that. And I realized that you are amazing sensitive to our Dutch easygoing habits, and, but in the meantime you clearly stick to your own ideas. Copy when necessary, but speak out when you want. And that's exactly what we saw here. You keep on reasoning, you think about your own things. What do I know? What do I think? Are there new opportunities? And the members of the committee, they all were very happy to see you performing today. So, in the past years, you did really a good job, and you learned very fast. And of course, in the beginning, the English writing was not so easy, but that improved very much. And also, you were very good in making large graphs with much information. And there, sometimes we had to restrict you a little bit, keep it a bit more simple. And that's exactly what you showed now during your presentation. I think it was a perfect presentation. Good for everybody to understand what you actually were doing. And the same happened with your publications. The first one indeed took some time, but gradually you improved, and now you managed to have published all your original work in 5 very nice papers. So fantastic, congratulations with that as well, great job. We were working together in a consortia, TKI consortium, DINCA, and of which you were then a member, of course, and you were always very good in collaborating, in assisting. We had to work intensely together with Eindhoven University, especially with Yvonne de Kort, who is sitting here. And yeah, we worked very nice and smoothly, and I would like to take the opportunity also to thank you, because I think the contribution from Eindhoven was very nice. And of course Rick, but Rick was with us. So yes, so very nice, but I go back to Wei immediately, of course. Yes, so you tested a lot of things before you could actually start your work. You had to work with the personal control system, it wasn't already, you had to prepare it, you had the lighting system, and with that you worked with companies like Arendt and Almende, and it worked very smoothly, I must say. And despite the corona, you managed to do all these measurements on a long runs and long days. So I always knew where to find Wei. He was at the MRAM lab, sitting behind the desk, taking care that all the questionnaires were filled in right. You were more or less living there in those days. Maybe you learned from me, but I also learned from you. To mention one thing, Chinese food. We invited you several times at our house, and first we cooked, of course, but gradually you took over and started preparing Chinese food, which we appreciated very much. But when you came to our house, you didn't take only the food, but you also took the tools, like a good knife, because you didn't like our knives, of course. And yes, it was as with your studies, you are always well prepared, I must say. And then you learned something else from me, that is biking. In the beginning, Wei already bought a new bike, which has worked very well. So we make nice trips in Heuvelland. I could show you around in COVID times. And that was very nice. But then we had last year a congress in Rotterdam. And there, you rented the bike with a terugtraprem. A back pedal brake, you call that. So I explained several times to you how it works. But that took a while. Every time when I had to stop for a light, I heard him yell, "Oh, Wouter, here I come!" Followed by a crash against my bike that stopped Wei's vehicle. So we haven't really great accidents, but anyway, we survived. And then I have to mention the Healthy Buildings Congress we attended both in 2019 in China. And that was a fantastic experience. It was a nice congress. I really felt welcome by the organization. It was a great meeting. But most of it, I liked the tours we made afterwards. And there I really want to say, to thank you, how nice this touristic trip was. But it was more than a touristic trip, because you really planned everything, you organized it, and I could not have wished a better guide during that trip. We saw fantastic parts of China, like the Phoenix ancient city, but also the Zhangjiajie, which is a beautiful nature park with impressive rock pillars and famous from the movie Avatar. You all know that. So we just walked there and saw everything there. But most interesting, I think, was the cultural aspect, the temples that we visited together with your parents. We visited several temples, and I was really impressed by that. And during the trip, I learned more about Chinese food. The stinky tofu is not really my thing, but coconut chicken and hot pot and so were really fantastic. And Wei felt a little bit responsible for me. I was then a bit coughing and not so well healthy, a bit ill. So he took care that I never drank more than 2 beers per evening, which even my wife never dared to accomplish. So you took your responsibility even for that. So, and that I now realize was the last time you visited China, 2019, 3.5 years ago. Due to COVID and travel restrictions that followed, you were not able to return to China. COVID must have been a hard time for you, Wei, and you showed great flexibility and perseverance, but it must have been harder than you showed to us. You simply silently continued what needed to be done and tried to keep on enjoying your life, making new friends. I admire you for that, and now, after such a long time, you see your parents again, and I'm very glad that for you and your parents, that you finally meet each other after such a long time. And that's during this occasion, a milestone in your career. And I want to say a little bit more about that because I want to stress that I admire you for something else. You managed to achieve this in a very good way. I already told you the compliments of the committee. You did a really good job. And you did that from an extremely different, both social and cultural background. And I'm very happy that you accomplished all that. Okay. And I'm very proud that you already have a postdoc position now at Riksplace in Eindhoven. I'm sure you will have a fruitful and meaningful future in science and in your life. I want to thank the members of the reading committee and the people who came here at the ceremony, also from outside Maastricht, especially Professor Marcel Schweiker from Aachen. Very nice you are here, and I really hope in the future we have nice collaboration. And of course, Professor Philomena Bluisen from the screen, from Delft. Thank you for being with us by this means. And I want to stress that I like very much that we have people from so many disciplines here. Like we have from finance, Piet Eichholz, Professor Piet Eichholz, and from thermal comfort, Marcel Schweiker, and of course Rick Kramer, and from the light expertise, Yvonne de Kort. So really a nice set of people together. And for now, I'd like to end and Wei, enjoy. Thank you.
Dr. Luo, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree you have acquired. I think it's well deserved. And I can tell you that the degree committee was very impressed with the way you defended your thesis. And I hope you will also look back with satisfaction on your performance today, because you really did very well. I also like the topic of your thesis, and I found one of the results of your thesis very reassuring for me personally, because I'm one of the persons that always has cold hands and cold feet. And I understand that that doesn't hamper my productivity, and that's quite an assurance for me. I also like to read the parts you wrote in italics as a kind of introduction to the beginning and the end. And I almost wondered, why didn't you write such introduction to each of your chapters? Because they really give some kind of background information on what it was about. I really like that. Well, with that, I'd like to congratulate your supervisors. I'd like to thank the members of the committee here present. The university really is very happy with all the people that spend time to make these ceremonies possible. So thank you very much for that. And with this, I'd like to close this academic ceremony. I would like we make a picture here, picture on the stair, and then we will meet you at the reception area. Of course, you